What it said here is that the chain reaction creates extremely high temperatures, and those temperatures can be almost as high as 752 degrees Fahrenheit. So when you see a lot of these stories about these fires, not only is it because these batteries have or carry an intense amount of energy, but when these fires occur, the heat is extreme. And it's as I read from the fire chief there in New York, it's extremely difficult for them to be able to put these fires out.
I'm listening to your show.
The point that there's limited news
I just want to know what your viewpoint is.
because major news organizations have been told on, what they can report on.
The people's voice. Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the people's voice. I am Trey Evans, and I am the people's voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. As always, we take time to say thank you to everyone who's listening. We do understand that you could be utilizing your time to do something else, so we appreciate you taking some time to listen to the podcast today. As always, if this information is valuable and you find it to be enlightening, we do ask that you subscribe to the podcast. That way you'll be notified when each episode is released. We put out a new episode each and every Friday, which can be heard on all podcast platforms. And then we also put a video out on YouTube, which will be each and every Wednesday. And you can check out the video over there. But as always, thank you for spending your time equity with us, and welcome to the People's Voice podcast. So today, I want to get into the stories behind the fires that are occurring as a result of e-bikes and e-scooters. There has been a number of stories reported about explosions, occurring from these bikes and these scooters. Mostly recently in the news, it's been about the e-bikes. So I want to talk about that today. I want to talk a little bit about where this is occurring the most at in terms of where in the country, the reasons why it's occurring, and then, of course, discuss what you can do to prevent this from occurring if you have an e-bike or if you're thinking about purchasing an e-bike. An e-bike is just an electronic bike, the bikes that are battery powered. Sometimes they're called pedal assist bikes is another phrase for them. Basically, you can basically it's a regular bike for those who don't know, and I'm just describing it because maybe not everyone knows. It's just a regular bike, but it has battery pack on it, and when you need assistance with pedaling, or if you just want to cruise and don't want to pedal, you can basically just flip a switch on there, and the bike pedals for you. So that's why it's called pedal assist, but most known as e-bikes or electronic bikes. But in any event, I want to talk about that today. And, part of the reason why I want to talk about it is because I currently don't own an e-bike. I've, been riding road bikes for years, but definitely was starting to consider, whether or not I should get an e-bike. Just because, sometimes, listen, the benefits of riding riding bikes or road bikes, however you want to coin that phrase, go above and beyond, right? It's that cardio workout is like nothing else that you will experience, at least in my opinion. But sometimes you just want to be able to just cruise around, right? I'm a motorcyclist, and I like riding motorcycles, but sometimes you just want to be on the trail and just kind of enjoy the scenery without always having to exert yourself, if you will. So I understand the premises behind the e-bike. And like I said, part of me doing this podcast today was because I was looking at them. And then, of course, as you start looking towards anything on Google, you start getting all these stories. So, but let me talk about that today. Let's talk about the e-bike fires that have been occurring here, especially in the last 3-4 years. So, this has really been a topic of discussion in New York City. New York City is pretty much the epicenter, if you will, of e-bikes here in the United States. And a lot of that is because e-bikes are being used for not just recreational purposes, but many delivery services, your food delivery services, even some package delivery services are utilizing people to, carry out those jobs, and they're using e-bikes, right? It's obviously a much cheaper mode of transportation than a car. When you're in a populous city such as New York City, trying to navigate the streets of New York City with a car, for those of you who have been there or lived there, you know how difficult that can be, especially in the city in Manhattan. So e-bikes have really exploded in New York, no pun intended. And as a result of this, New York City has some of the highest reported numbers of fires as a result of e-bikes. And, as I was looking at this, one of the first things that I wanted to understand was, well, why is this occurring, right? What is it that makes a bike explode? And, as I started to delve deeper into it, it's not just the bike itself. What's really occurring is that you have these batteries that are on these e-bikes, which are exploding. And this is creating, or, basically creating these fires that you see being reported now. And to understand it a little bit more, I said, well, let me do a little bit of research so I can, understand, well, what is it about the battery? So these batteries, they are lithium ion batteries, and lithium ion batteries are common. You have lithium ion batteries in all type of devices, your cell phones, laptops, your hoverboards, electric toothbrushes, even in Teslas and electric vehicles. This is commonly the common battery that is used. Obviously, in each of those devices, the batteries are different sizes and, kind of are utilized in a different way. But basically, lithium ion batteries are being used on these bikes as well. But what occurs is that when these batteries reach a certain heat internally, they explode. And so I want to talk about that process a little bit, and then go a little bit more into what's going on in New York City and what's being done. So the process or the reaction, if you will, when these batteries explodes, it's called thermal runaway. And I'm reading an article here from dragonflyenergy.com where they did a great breakdown of what happens when thermal runaway occurs in lithium ion batteries. And, first, I didn't know what it meant, so I'm just not going to assume that you listening and watching knows what it means. So we'll go through this together in terms of breaking this down. But, basically in the article, it states here that thermal runaway is a chain reaction within a battery cell that can be very difficult to stop once it's started. Basically, what happens is it occurs when the temperature inside the battery reaches a point where it causes a chemical reaction. So, these batteries are designed to withstand, or I should say, basically deal with a certain level of heat. And once it gets above that point, this is when you get a chemical reaction from the cells within inside the battery, and then you get the explosion. And these fires that occur can be like extremely hot to the point where it becomes almost difficult to extinguish. I was reading an article here from Consumer Reports, and they had a fire chief here was describing, a fire chief in New York was describing what that heat is like. And, in the article, he says, it's very violent, it's very fast, and it's hard to extinguish. It said that, the battery pack, when they fail, those battery cells inside those batteries can shoot almost 60 feet in the air. And when they explode, it's like little pellets or, if you will, almost small bombs of fire that go in each and every direction. So when these fires occur, it like you literally can have a e-bike in your apartment or in your basement or in your garage, and literally instantaneously when this battery explodes, you got fire on like all walls and ceilings because this explosion goes in every direction and the heat is very intense. Matter of fact, going back to that article from Dragonfly, they were talking about the intensity of the heat. And it says that, first of all, the heat rises literally in a matter of milliseconds. Like instantaneously, it goes from normal heat to just, almost an explosive heat in literally in a matter of milliseconds. But what it said here is that the chain reaction creates extremely high temperatures, and those temperatures can be almost as high as 752 degrees Fahrenheit. So when you see a lot of these stories about these fires, not only is it because these batteries have or carry an intense amount of energy, but when these fires occur, the heat is extreme. And it's, as I read from the fire chief there in New York, it's extremely difficult for them to be able to put these fires out. Now, kind of going back, as I was saying, New York City is really, really dealing with this in terms of on a national basis, dealing with this the most because there's been a huge explosion of e-bikes. And I keep saying explosion, no pun intended, but there's literally been an increase of e-bikes in New York City and really around the world. I mean, I was reading a stat here about the amount of e-bikes that are currently projected to be sold, and also the amount of e-bikes that have been sold, since 2021. I'm looking at this stat from the roundup.org, and they kind of broke out the amount of e-bikes that are being sold since 2021. It's projected that there'll basically be, this year alone, there are 300 million e-bikes worldwide. And then annual e-bike sales, they say basically 17 million will be sold each year by, 2030. So this is important information because obviously someone is considering buying an e-bike at this point, or they own an e-bike. But getting back into New York, so like I was saying, this is a huge issue. In New York, it's been reported that since 2021, they've had about almost 220. And I'm reading the article here. I'm back here on Consumer Reports. It says, as reported in December of 2022, New York City reported almost 202 fires as a result of e-bikes, and there was 6 deaths. That was just last year of December. That was just in December of 2022. Currently today, as of October 2023, there have been reports of almost 230 injuries or fires as a result of e-bikes in New York, and already there's been 14 deaths. So the number of deaths have already doubled since last year, and this is only going to keep increasing because, as I just mentioned, e-bikes are being sold left and right. not just in New York City, but around the world. And New York City is trying to address this. There's been a lot of conversation regarding the certifications that a lot of these e-bikes come with, and then I'll talk about that a little bit as well in terms of what you can do and how these fires can be prevented, and also what causes these fires or causes those batteries to explode. But let me play this clip from New York One in New York, and Mayor Adams just recently signed a new legislation. He signed legislation in earlier this year to have these e-bikes or mandate these e-bikes to be certified before they can be sold, at least locally. So let me play that clip, and then we'll continue and go from there. So
we're much cheaper than those.
This spring, Mayor Eric Adams signed into law a new requirement that by September of this year, all e-bikes and e-scooters sold in New York City have Underwriter Laboratories or UL certification, a safety stamp of approval that is the gold standard in the United States. It's already used on many things we have around the house, like toasters and refrigerators.
It does help bolster.
And I wanted to play that because that's a very important piece in terms of what can be done moving forward. As you heard there, that UL stamp is huge in terms of safety requirements to ensure that going forward, these bikes and these e-scooters are safe to be not only used, but also to be sold. And I had to look this up myself, and actually I'm pulling it back up as I'm sitting here talking to you, because I was like, I've seen the UL before, but I really didn't know what it meant. And basically the UL is University Laboratories, I think. Let me just, and I'm doing it live, guys, so just bear with me. What does Universal UL mean? And I have it here, and then I forgot what I did with it, but it is a standard of safety, Underwriters Laboratory. Underwriters Laboratory, and Underwriters Laboratory or UL Solutions is basically a science and safety company. And what they do is they test all of these products here in the United States. And then once they are stamped with the UL certification, that means that they have passed the safety standards and are considered to be safe. Now, obviously, nothing is foolproof, but that UL requirement that New York City is putting on local dealers, and again, these are local bike sellers, and I want to make that distinction because obviously many people purchase from Amazon and other online retailers, and so doesn't necessarily have to apply, and I'll kind of talk about that here as I close out. But at least in New York City, they're trying to do something to make sure that safety, there's a safety standard to help to try to reduce some of these fires. And in that law, that New York City law, what they have mandated or what they have required is that they want those bikes to be stamped with either the UL 2849 standard, which is a standard for electrical system, the standard for electrical systems for e-bikes. And this would include any bike that's powered by a battery, and this any bike that is sold, distributed, leased, or rented in New York. They also want to have the UL 2271 standard, and this standard is required in New York. All batteries have to be stamped for this, or they say all batteries that are used in what they consider light electric vehicles, which could be scooters and e-bikes, things of that nature. So that UL 2271 should be stamped on the battery. That gives it the that's to certify that it's been tested and it's been safe. And that UL 2271 and that UL 2849 is not just for New York City. That stamp, if you're buying e-bikes or if you own an e-bike, you should want to ask the retailer or confirm that that has been certified and that's also listed somewhere on the e-bike and the battery that you purchase. So now, even though we have this legislation in place, right, and New York is kind of leading the way in this, you still have a lot of pushback because one of the conversations is that a lot of these fires are occurring, as I said before, because you have so many people signing up to do DoorDash and do other, deliveries on these e-bikes because it's a job for a lot of these people. New York City was also pushing some of the food delivery services like DoorDash and Uber Eats to be responsible for buying those bikes. That way, they would be responsible and required to make sure that those bikes have that UL certification. But a lot of those, food delivery services were pushing back a little bit. Matter of fact, let me play this clip from CBS News to New York, and they spoke to a DoorDash representative, and check out what he said.
Companies testified in opposition, outlining concerns about potential fraud.
A company like DoorDash would be required to actually purchase an e-bike and a battery for the individual. They could quit DoorDash tomorrow, sign up for Uber Eats the next day. Uber Eats would have to provide an e-bike, and there's no mechanism to control that.
And so that was the main concern for them, that they basically are saying, hey, we don't want to buy a bike and then have this individual go work for another company and either A, use the bike that we purchased for them, or B, they go and work for that delivery service and now they have two e-bikes because there's no way to basically track, how that's going to work. So there has been a push for trying to get these delivery companies, to move forward and take control of the e-bike because their services are obviously benefiting from them, but they're pushing back and saying, well, we don't want that type of responsibility because there's no way that we can ensure that we're going to be able to control that. And obviously we don't want another company to profit from that. So at the end of the day, as if you guys listen to this podcast, it's all about the money at the end of the day, as I've always talked about. But what can be done? So now I talked about those things. Obviously, I want to talk about some solutions and also talk about some of the causes. So what causes these batteries to explode? One of the main things is one of the main reasons that these batteries explode is because either they are put next to a direct source of heat. Many times if they're in direct sunlight, because in many of these stories, when you hear e-bike exploded, it's e-bike down in the basement, maybe e-bike in an apartment. And if you're in tight spaces or, you don't have proper storage for these bikes, these batteries, as I said in the beginning, heat up very quickly. And in a lot of these fires, that has been some of the causes of it, is that, they've been in direct heat or they've been in direct sunlight. Also, if the battery is dropped, and sometimes people don't notice the damage that is done, this can cause a chain reaction too, because it exposes the battery to the elements and it can cause that chemical reaction that I talked about earlier. Also, what is often understated, especially in these scenarios, a lot of these delivery individuals that buy these e-bikes and work for these food services, they're trying to buy the cheapest bike possible. And a lot of these bikes are not manufactured with the highest safety standards. And so those batteries oftentimes are not UL certified, and those batteries are more susceptible, if you will, to going into a situation where they can possibly explode. It's also recommended that you do not use a battery from another manufacturer. So if you buy a bike from one manufacturer, what is often recommended is that you go back to that manufacturer to get a new battery if you need a new battery, because apparently the interchanging of batteries can cause some issues, because and I don't want to get too technical, there's something called a battery management system, and each battery is kind of designed with a specific battery management system to support that battery. So when you start switching batteries from e-bike to e-bike, this can possibly cause an issue as well. But some other issues, some other things that cause the e-bikes to explode is, and I know it's going to sound crazy, but there are people that charge the e-bikes battery under their pillows. They'll put it in a box. You have to be very careful. And at the end of the day, read the instructions, go online, or call the manufacturer to ensure that you're doing this correctly, because a lot of these fires, when they're investigated, could have been prevented if some small steps had been taken to ensure that the batteries were being properly stored and also properly charged. And then that's the last one, and then I'll close out from here. Overcharging the battery can also lead to an e-fire. So, sometimes people leave these batteries on overnight, and the instructions might say it only needs to be charged for 6 hours. But somebody might leave it charged, from 9 o'clock at night to 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, which is obviously way more than 6 hours. And now that battery overheats and explodes. So these are just some of the things that A, cause the battery to explode, and then B, these are some of the things that you can do to prevent the battery from exploding. But like anything else, do your own research when you decide to buy these e-bikes, and also follow the manufacturer's instructions when it comes to storage and also charging of these e-bikes and their batteries. That's what I wanted to talk about today. Like I said, I've been in the market myself, and this information was helpful to me, so I wanted to spread the word. And if it was helpful to you, as always, we ask that you feel free to reach out to us on any of the social media platforms. You can reach me at I am Trey Evans at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Trey Evans on LinkedIn. And then you can also reach us at the People's Voice Podcast on Instagram, the People's Voice Podcast. So that is my time for today. As always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the People's Voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute.
I am Trey Evans.